I want to bring in House Homeland Security Chairman and former Army Special Operations Flight Surgeon Mark Green. Mr. Chairman, we know that you know this aircraft very well and how to get out of it when it goes into the water. What can you tell us? What do you know? And when you hear that it's in 7 feet of water and the Black Hawk helicopter is upside down, what do you think about this scenario?
Well, most of the time when an aircraft goes in the water, particularly a helicopter, the engines are on top, so it's going to rotate. We do dunker training once a year to prepare for this, and it's extremely difficult to get out of it. You pretty much have to memorize your way out of the aircraft because when in this situation, it's black water, it's night. This is exactly what I'd expect. And 7 feet of water is, if you can't get out of the aircraft, that's more than enough to make it unsurvivable. They have to get out of the aircraft, to make it. So hopefully they did. This is a tragedy. And you have to think about, too, those non-trained passengers in that aircraft, in the American Airlines aircraft, their seatbelts are buckled. Even if that part of the aircraft is intact and it hits the water, it's probably going to rotate, and they got to find their way out. I mean, it's just horrifying even thinking about it. And so I just, again, this is a massive tragedy.
Yeah, and Congressman, it's interesting, but when you watch this coverage, as you watched it all night, and by the way, we should just clarify something. We were told that that Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy was on the scene. He is not at DCA. He just informed us that he is not at DCA. We do not know if he's going to be there. So just for clarity, we do not know who's going to be at this news conference, if there will be officials from the airline, if there will be members of Congress, the governor. We do not know who is going to be at the news conference. But I'm wondering, as you watch the coverage here, what is something about this that you are not hearing? What information are you curious that you're not getting out of this?
Well, one of the observations I think that having done aircraft investigations, the flight surgeon does the human part. We check the pilots or we check them for various substances and chemicals and things. All that happens when there's a crash, right? And so the flight surgeon's involved in the crash investigation. And 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's multiple different things that line up. It's not one specific. People talk about, well, did the Black Hawk pilot see the aircraft that was taking off, get target fixation on that, and miss the one that was landing? You hear people talking about ATC and the time frame between the warning and the actual collision. Was that enough warning time from ATC? This is probably going to have many, many different things in it that should have gone differently that resulted in this happening. And I think that's really important to point out. It's not. Very rarely is it one particular thing that leads to a catastrophe like this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's spot on, because when I was learning to fly, they would always tell you, listen, it's not one thing that causes a crash. And this is back in the days when you had TWA Flight 800. It's not just one thing. It's always a series of events that happens. Yes. And as investigators kind of start peeling this back, they get to see, even for things like this that seems to be a collision in midair, you go back to the collision for, I think, the original PSA Airlines back in San Diego back in the 1970s, where a small plane hit PSA, killed everybody on both planes. It was a series of different changes, a series of altitude changes, a series of mistakes made by the person who was flying the small plane. So you're exactly right. And the question is, we are right now, Congressman, in the safest period in American history, in world history, in aviation. Clearly, it only goes back for the better part of 100 years, but still, we are in the safest time frame in American history for aviation. This would be the second fatal commercial airline crash in the past 16 years, and only the third since 2001.
Yeah, and it occurred in probably the most, for our country, one of the highest penetrated air-controlled airspaces, right? I mean, DCA and over the White House and over the Capitol building. I mean, the amount of radars and things that are monitoring that airspace probably the thickest, some of the thickest in the country, and this still happened. So there's going to be, some analysis on this for many weeks, but we have to get to the bottom of it, obviously.
Yeah, we do. Mark Green, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. If you think of anything else, come back on. We would love to hear from you again.